Hello, everyone. I just wanted to remind you that we're doing a Kickstarter right now for Bones' novel called Honey Walls. It's about a trans man on a quest to find his heart. And yeah, it's going on right now until May 15th, so please go support it. It's an illustrated novel with illustrations by Alex Dingley, and it's also going to be an audiobook narrated by Jonathan Coventry. So yeah, it's great. I love it. Go check it out. It's a wholesome read. Okay, on to the video. So comics are really hard. I think if you've attempted to make a comic, you probably know this. If you're thinking about starting a comic, you're probably looking at it like, oh my god, this is a crazy amount of work. How am I going to do this? Well, I'm here to help you. I've made many comics. I have made so many. Too many. But I have drawn many comics over many years, so I have some tips for how to make, the whole comic creation process a little bit easier on you. So yeah, I have 5 tips that probably are more than 5 because they have a few points to them. But tip number 1, when you're starting your comic, make sure that you pick a simple style and simple character designs. Now, this may go against everything you had planned for your comic, because I talked to you guys. I know that you all have really complicated stories with really complicated worlds and character designs and set pieces, and you have a million characters each. But what you should do is take all those ideas and try to scale them back as far as you can and make them as simple as you can. So whether this means making your first comic black and white, not doing a color comic, if this means getting rid of some of the big anime character designs that you have where they're all covered in zippers and belt buckles, get rid of that. Make it as simple as possible. Get as few details down as possible. And the reason for this is, like I said, comics take a lot. You have to do a lot of artwork on a single page. You can have dozens of panels on a page. And, if you're expecting to get this out every week or to put a book together within a year or so, you're going to have to do a lot of artwork very quickly. So the more simple the style of your comic, the more simple your character designs and set designs are, the faster you're going to get this out. And it's just going to make it way easier on yourself. It also helps with, trying to remember what your characters look like or making sure that everything is on model. If it's simpler, it's going to be easier to keep it on model. If it's more complicated, you're going to struggle the whole way through. So keep things simple as much as possible. I feel bad saying cut corners, but I don't know. If you're doing it intentionally, I don't know if it's really cutting corners. But, the faster you can get this out, the better. Especially if it's your first comic. It's really important when you're starting out to prove to yourself that you can, make it happen. So go out there and make it happen. And yeah, it might take a little bit of time to make your style simple, especially if you begin with a really complicated style. But trust me, the more you can take down all those details, it gets way easier. You'll be a lot happier for it. Tip number 2, make sure you do your thumbnails and your prep work. I know this may seem like you're like, Ursula, these are not making it easier for me. What is this? It's going to make your comic pages easier to do if you get a whole bunch of work done up front, which sucks and does sound counterintuitive to making it easier. But it makes your pages go way faster and it's way less of a headache if you have all of your characters put onto character sheets, like turnaround sheets where you can see what their costume looks like and what they look like, and maybe like an expression sheet or something. It helps to have setting designs done. It helps to have your thumbnails done, which are small little sketches of what your pages will look like without committing to all the detail right away. So, thumbnails are for focusing on your composition, where you're going to put your speech bubbles, where the characters are, how the panels are going to look and be laid out. Make sure you get all this prep work done so that when you actually sit down to work on the pages, you don't have to stop every, every few panels or pages to go like, oh, what does this character look like again? And flip back and look at your old pages. Or you draw a panel and it's just not working and nothing looks right and it's not flowing with the rest of the page. If you have your thumbnails done, if you have your setting and character designs done, and your, maybe your prop design or something, the more prep work you do up front, the easier the actual page creation gets. So, Yeah, that'll make it a lot easier on you. It's a lot easier on your mental load as you're making things, because illustrating stuff and being creative takes a lot of brain power. So just the more planning you get out of the way, the less of a headache it is. You can just focus on making the art instead of worrying about all the other stuff around it. It also really helps to have all this prep work done for when you're 300 pages in and you're like, oh shoot, what does this character look like? I don't remember. They haven't been in the comic for 200 pages. And then you have to go back and you have to look at your old art. And you're like, they're going to look totally different in my new style because I've drawn out 300 pages. And I, in my previous comics, used to make tons and tons of little mistakes, like drawing costumes wrong or drawing face shapes wrong, whatever it was, because I didn't have all this prep work done. But now that I do it, life is good. Tip number 3, when you are working on your actual pages, do your work in batches. This is something I heard at a comic book panel at Fan Expo years ago. I really wish I could remember the name of the studio that was talking, but they were saying that when you want to get your pages done really quickly, it really helps to work in batches. So for example, say you have 10 pages that you need to finish. Go through, do all of the pencil work. When you're done those, go through, do all the inking work. When you're done those, go through and do all the coloring, for example. And the reason this helps with being fast is you don't have to stop and switch gears. If you're doing all the pencils, you might have all your equipment out, whether it's pencils or digital work. You have your setup ready to just pencil. And you don't have to switch your mindset to working on something new like inking, where you might have to be slower and a lot more tighter with your lines or something. You can just focus on one task and get it all done for all your pages. And then once that's done, then you can switch gears, grab your ink, or switch your setup so that you can start working on inking, and then you do all those, etc., etc. And yeah, it really just helps keep you focused on one task. It gets you a little bit ahead, kind of. Instead of worrying about one page at a time, you can get a lot of progress done on many pages at once. This is how I tend to work. I will do a whole bunch of pencils, and then when I hit a wall, I might switch to doing inks. And yeah, it just really helps to get you in the right mindset. I find once I get into the rhythm, say I'm working on inks, once I get into the rhythm, it gets really easy to continue on to the next page, and I get faster as I go, because I don't have to focus on penciling or switch to coloring or something. I can just ink and be there in that headspace. It also probably helps with consistency, I'd imagine, because instead of completing a page and then going to the next one and not remembering what you did previously, you've inked 5 pages in a sitting, and it's great. So there you go. Work in batches. It really, really helps. Trust me. It makes your workflow a lot easier. Tip number 4, work fast and worry about making good art later. This mindset helped me a lot when I was beginning in comics. I've since slowed down quite a bit, but when I started, I really wanted to put out comic pages, and I'm sure you do too. I really wanted people to see my work. There were a lot of pages where I didn't know how to draw what I was drawing. I'd grab references and study and stuff, but I didn't know how to draw people properly. I didn't know how to draw settings or perspective. I didn't know how to color this or how to render that. But I was like, I'm just going to work fast. I'm going to get as many pages out as possible right now, and I'll just get better with more practice. And that is literally what happened. So don't worry too much about quality. I mean, if it really causes you a lot of distress to put out a page, don't put it out. Go back and work on it more. But it's really important to just focus on getting your story out, especially with your first comic, which you're going to look at later, and you're going to realize you made a whole bunch of beginner mistakes. So it's really good to just get it out quickly and fail quickly. The faster you make mistakes, the faster you can correct them, instead of waiting till you're 10 years into your career and then you're like, oh no, I've been doing this wrong the whole time. But yeah, it's really important to just, when you're starting out, focus on getting stuff done quickly, and it'll just get better with time. There's a lot of forgiveness in webcomics, especially when you begin your comic. There's a lot of understanding in webcomics that when you start a comic, it might not be your best work. which is totally fine and awesome. And when someone finds your comic 300 pages in and they see how amazing the artwork is because, you've worked hard and you've improved as an artist because you've been putting out pages, they're going to go back and read the beginning of your comic where the art might not be quite as good, but they'll still read it to get to your amazing art 300 pages in. Yeah, it really is. It's really important to make mistakes quickly and not live in fear of making mistakes and just be okay with making them, and you'll get your work out quickly. You can get more stories out if that's really important to you, and you can always fix it later. Secret extra tip: you can always go back and edit your work and re-upload it. That's totally fine. If it's really bothering you, like a year from now, looking at cruddy old pages, you can always fix them later. That is actually a thing that Bones and I do in our comics, where we call it save it for the Blu-ray, which is a term that refers to TV anime, where usually, because they're really short deadlines, they might cut a few corners on some of the animations, things might look wonky, whatever, and then it goes and airs on TV, but when they sell the Blu-ray later, they'll go back, they'll fix up wonky animations, make it all pretty, and then release it as how it probably was initially intended to look. So that's what Bones and I do with our comics. We'll usually get it out quickly, get it on the internet for people to read, and then later, when we're going to publish it into a book, we'll go back and we'll fix it up, and we'll smooth out all the corners, we'll make it look really pretty, and then publish it. So yeah, don't be afraid to put out a first draft and then fix it later. That's totally okay. People will forgive you. Don't worry about it. Tip number 5, I think this one is definitely the most important. When you are working on your art, instead of setting progress goals for every time you sit down to work, set a time goal instead. So I used to have a lot of anxiety around making art and a lot of frustration because I'd sit down and I'd be like, okay, I've got 2 hours, I'm going to finish a page. And then I'd sit down and I'd be drawing the whole time, but I wouldn't finish the page. Just something would come up, maybe this panel looks weird and I have to redraw it a bunch of times. Or maybe I'm having a bad art day and I just can't draw stuff right. Or this thing was more complicated to draw than I thought it was. And I would go over time and be really frustrated and angry with myself that I couldn't finish a page. I'm like, oh, I'm such a bad artist, I can't draw anything right, and I can't get anything done on time, this sucks. And it would make me not want to work on my comics. And it was horrible, it sucked. But what really turned it around for me, what made me kind of love art again, was I started focusing on the time I put in instead of the progress I made. So instead of sitting down for 2 hours and being like, well, I better finish this page, I'd sit down and be like, as long as I draw for the 2 hours, cool. And honestly, I chop it down into smaller sections because sitting down for 2 hours can be really daunting and I'd probably put it off. So what I usually do is I'll sit down for 20 to 30 minutes. I'll put a timer on and be like, as long as I draw through all of this, through the whole 30 minutes, I'm good. I don't care how far I get. My butt is in the chair and I'm just going to draw for 30 minutes. It's a really great tool to combat procrastination because you're like, well, it's a really small amount of time. 30 minutes isn't that long. I can sit down and focus and do it. And, as soon as that timer's on and you're drawing, you might get lost in it and you'll forget that you didn't want to work on it before. And it's also great for if you don't have all that much time to draw in the day. I'm someone who works a full-time job and, I'm sure you might have school, you might have other responsibilities, whatever it is. You might not have time to work on your comics, or you might have multiple projects you're working on and each of them requires time during the day. So sitting down for 30 minutes to just work on one project, that's doable in a day. You probably have 30 minutes somewhere in your day to do it. If you don't, try 10 minutes. That's valid. That's just as good as long as you're getting your work done. And by getting your work done, I mean working on it. You don't have to finish anything, don't worry. Working on timed sessions instead of focusing on how much progress you make, it'll hurt your feelings way less. It'll make you like art more. And as long as you just do it regularly, you're gonna get your comic pages done. Heck yeah. So I hope all of those tips help. Comics, like I said, are really difficult. They're frustrating. They're time consuming. Sometimes they feel like such a thankless job. So anything you can do to make it easier, to make it more fun, do it. And I hope that these tips help you do those things. These are all things that I've struggled with in the past. You probably know this if you've watched my other videos. But yeah, I used to make stuff way too detailed, and struggle with keeping characters consistent. My first comic was a color comic and it took forever to finish, whereas now I do a lot more black and white comics, which we get out quicker. I learned how to work in batches. I do thumbnails and prep work instead of just working on the fly all the time. The only reason I work more slowly now is because I had years of working really, really fast. And now that I'm up to a point where I feel like my art is a good quality, I can spend more time on the craft. I've learned my stuff. I don't know where I'm going with this. Man, Bones, you're gonna have fun editing this. But the reason I can slow down on my comic pages now is that, I've got a good library behind me and my skill is at a point where if I make a mistake, I can sit down and work my way through it. Whereas, when I started comics, I probably would not have been able to, if I made a mistake in something, I probably wouldn't know how to fix it. So I would just push on past. And you know what? I got my comic pages done, and that's good. That's all I needed at the time. And that's probably all you need at the time if you're starting right now, maybe. I don't know. Let me know what you do to make your comic process easier. Maybe I'm doing something that, I don't need to do. And I could just make my process easier. And yeah, let me know. I want to know what you guys do. I want to know what you think. Leave a comment down below. And while you're looking underneath the video, go check out the Kickstarter for Honey Walls. I'm really excited about it. Bones is really excited about it. I don't really have a hand in it. I'm offering a few watercolor illustrations to some of the backers, but I have not really done anything for the book. It's all Bones and the fellas he's working with. So yeah, go check it out. It's a really good book. I've read it. I love it. It's one of my faves. It is wonderful queer content. Thank you so much for watching. Like I said, I hope these are helpful. I'm feeling a little scatterbrained today, so I don't know if what I said made sense, but hopefully it does. And I wish you lots of luck in your comics. They are difficult beasts to tame, but you can do it. I believe in you. Make good art, have fun making art, and yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye!